really. Anyhow, I began to do visual poetry, and at one point was working in Chicago after spending a year or two in Buffalo, New York, and just out of kind of an impetuous interest, bought a rubber stamp pad and started corresponding with many poetry friends using rubber stamp letters primarily. And that one thing led to another, and I have developed a large inventory of typefaces in rubber stamps and woodblock, and just started pursuing the idea of the poem as a structure that you write kind of very much letter by letter, with an appreciation for the graphic bite, look, and feel of type, with an interest in exploring the page as something more than a blank surface on which to lay my words, and to look at the found page with the recognition that I learn something all the time when I examine new or obsolete pages. And the old pages began to interest me graphically more and more as I began to disassemble books and take apart the unified structure of books and look at pages out of sequence so that I could see the graphic design of the page a bit differently than with the narrative dominating, and have just developed a practice as a visual poet that starts with what is already there on the page. So with rare exception, most of the language that I use is somewhere in the page that I overprint. And on those occasions when I work with a clean page, there's usually an impetus sort of like what I described. There's a bit of direction that comes from some other printed matter. But let's look at the 5 slides that I have, and I think they'll illustrate. So can we look at the first one, Clay? Oh, that's the second, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the first one.
That's the first one. Okay, let's go to that. Oh.
And next.
Do we have? I've lost.
Clay, can we see the next slide? Yes, perfect.
Okay. Which I don't have the slide, so just tell me what it is that you have.
It's the
dose is 10 or 20 drops.
The dose is 10 or 20 drops. Just a second. All of a sudden I've totally lost my Zoom. I don't know if people can see me.
Yep.
We can hear you.
You can hear me.
Now we can see you again, yeah.
All right. The slide that you're looking at, let me show it to you in this version as well, and just to give you a sense of its scale. It's about 10 by 18 inches on the original page. My ideas in this were to examine the importance of letters, and I was just starting an alphabetic book. So A was the first letter. I was using a page, a double wide spread, 2 pages out of sequence, but that formed this beautiful semi-cross with an opening in the middle. I had been looking at a collection of illustrated manuscripts, so I spent time using a metallic type and very lightly brushing my type surface with a gold ink on top of red that gave it a rich, warm, kind of almost bloody, dried blood look. And the plants and the language was interesting to me. It's a successful piece that's been reprinted a few times. Let's look at the next one. Now, again, which one is number 2? I can't see them.
Origins of Poetry. Remove the finger.
Remove the finger. That the Origins of Poetry series, which several of these are part of, has been a kind of 20-year obsession to track the ideas that inspire me as a poet in the different books and pages that I work with in rubber stamping. That particular page was selected by Jeff Huth when he developed a portfolio of visual poetry that was subsequently printed in Poetry Magazine in 2008. And it was the first of 3 of my poems that have been printed in poetry over the years. Again, it has a kind of an inspiration in artist books. It's a carefully done page with decorative elements, but I want each individual letter and the arrangement of each word on the page to draw your eye and to kind of occupy the reader's or viewer's aesthetic interest. Let's look at the next one, which should be miscellaneous worker.
That's right.
There, the interest was initially just in that obsolete IBM punch card. And I had a stack of them that I had somehow hung on to over the years, and started working with them. All the language that I appropriated appears somewhere on that blue punch card. So Miss Worker is up in the upper left-hand corner, and there was a little signature by someone who had checked off the information. And I love it for its kind of industrial type look. And because to me, it's a mini poem that has a solid image, and the idea of miscellaneous worker to me tells a kind of a blue collar story that doesn't need a whole lot of elaboration when printed in the kind of rough, gritty black on blue way that that graphic appears. And what's in the next one?
This
Again,
is Boutique Politics.
Boutique politics are broken down so that it's boutique politics, is from the letters of Norman Mailer. And after Mailer's death, I think his letters were posthumously published, if I remember correctly, but the New Yorker ran a sequence of his letters, and I went through there, found phrases that interested me, and was working with an old text called The Boomers. It was written many years before the popularization of boomers to describe a generation was part of the vocabulary of our culture. But the pages are wonderful to work with. And so I adopted bits of Norman Mailer's highly political language to a series of about 12 or 15 poems, of which Boutique Politics is one. And what's next?
And this is the last one. This is Remember How We Form
Yes.
One Another.
Remember How We Form One Another. Again, from the Origins of Poetry. What's worth noting there is an interest in the desiccated, aged, near crumbling paper. That piece of paper you can see it's yellowed, almost a kind of sepia as it's dried out. And so the fibers of the paper spoke to me of kind of the fragmentary things that sustain life. And the book is in French. It's an architectural manual, very fine, thin line mechanical drawings that spoke to me about fragility and structure and unity. And the phrase, that poem was done during the pandemic. I've been doing visual poems throughout this last isolated year that in one way or another to me represent the circumstance. And so that is one of a series that that grew out of the last 8 or 9 months work.
Joel,
And yes,
do you think that later I could have one of your addresses to give to the group? Because I think some of them would like to follow your work. And
bet.
so I'll do that for the group.
great.
And it's been wonderful to have you. I'm so glad you could come and be with us.
Well, it's a pleasure.
Stick around if you can, and
Yeah.
you look wonderful. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you all for having me and having an interest in this visual work. Christy, great to hear from you and to collaborate with you on this. All right. I'm backing off.
Thank you, Joel. That was pretty interesting. Okay. So Christy, we're going to move Christy to the end and if we have time. And so I'm going to go first.